I never used to be the sort of person who double-checked doors. Growing up in Glenmore, a small coastal town with a stubborn little harbor and more gulls than trouble, the world felt buffered, as if real danger belonged to somewhere else. People left bikes unlocked, neighbors borrowed each other's tools, and the worst things were bored kids breaking into vending machines or the occasional drunk row outside O'Hara's pub. Serious stuff? Not here. At least that's what I told myself. In 2023, I was 27 and had just moved in with my fiancé, Ryan. We'd rented a charming, slightly lopsided two-story on the edge of town, 5 minutes to the river trail, woods on one side and retirees who watered their lawns like it was sacred land on the other. The house wasn't new. The floors creaked in the exact places you'd expect. But we loved the garden, the quiet, and that weird American-style utility shed out back with the washing machine and dryer. The estate agent said an American family had built it years ago. Ryan liked the novelty of it. I worked remotely as a graphic designer. Ryan ran the local car dealership and did long hours. He was out the door by 8 and not home until 7 or later most nights. My Thursdays were light. That particular Thursday began like any other, ordinary in a way that made the ordinary dangerous. Early autumn had finally broken the heat of a brutal summer. I remember opening the windows that morning because the house had been stuffy, and the breeze felt like permission to breathe. I made mint tea in the conservatory and watched birds peck at the last of the blackberries, while sunlight fractured over the glass. Around 3, I decided to throw a load in. The shed is only a short walk through the back garden. The conservatory door was cracked open to let air in, and I didn't bother to latch it. Stupid small thing. I convinced myself I'd be gone for a minute. The machine was right there and the yard was fenced. Who walks into other people's yards in Glenmore? Not like a city where anything can happen. I tossed the laundry in, including Ryan's favorite pajama bottoms, soft plaid things he always left slung over chairs, hit the wash and let the conservatory door sit ajar. It felt harmless. I came back inside, made a sandwich, and flopped on the couch to a cooking show I'd seen a dozen times. I must have dozed because the next thing I remember is that half-awake, heavy feeling between sleep and wakefulness. At about 5:15 I heard it, a dull thud from upstairs. It wasn't a house-settling creak or a pipe rattle. It landed in my ribs like someone had tapped a palm on wood. Instantly alert, I paused the TV. Our house had an entire vocabulary of noises. Wind in the eaves, the radiator protesting, the bedroom floorboards that answered you if you stepped wrong. But this sounded foreign. I listened. For a beat, there was only the faint drone of the dryer in the shed and the distant hum of the streetlights blinking on. Probably just a book, I told myself out loud, a little laugh stuck in my throat. Don't be dramatic. Still, I remembered how neat the bedroom had been when I'd tidied earlier. Books on the shelf, things squared away. I stood and climbed the stairs slowly, partly because I wanted to hear if any new sound would betray itself, and partly because my hands had that prickle that comes before panic. The upstairs hallway was low and dim, the sun having slid its angle and thrown long shadows across the floorboards. I checked the bathroom. It was as I'd left it. The guest room door was still closed. The house smelled faintly of rosemary from the dish soap and something else, the metallic, nervous scent that comes with adrenaline. In our bedroom at first, everything seemed normal. The bed made, the lamp still warm where I'd left it. But then I saw the shelf. 3 books lay scattered on the floor, spines splayed like someone had rifled through them and changed their minds. One of my small ceramic ornaments, the delicate hand-painted one I'd bought in Barcelona with my sister, had rolled halfway across the room, leaving a tiny trail of dust. That ornament wasn't the kind of thing that toppled without a nudge. You had to almost be careless to send it skittering. My chest tightened and a tiny sound escaped me, half sob, half laugh. I crouched, fingers brushing spines as if touching them might explain the disorder. "Okay," I whispered, ridiculous and hopeful at once. "Wind, house settling. Ryan's been leaving his boots in the hall again." The words felt thin. I set the books back on the shelf with more care than usual, and the action did nothing to steady me. The room held its breath, then my eyes shifted to the closet. We had a large built-in closet with 3 sliding mirrored doors. Normally, we'd leave the middle one cracked a few inches so jackets and shoes were easier to grab. Lazy, practical, whatever. That evening, it sat pushed open more than usual. a gap that made the mirrors catch the dying light at strange, slanted angles. The reflections multiplied the hallway into odd, empty versions of itself, and my skin prickled. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but my gut was humming like an insect. There was nothing to see, no movement, no shadow resolving into a shape. Only the sense that the air had thickened, like someone had breathed into the room and not let the fog go. I went back downstairs and texted Ryan, "Hey, I think I heard something upstairs earlier. Could be nothing, but it's freaking me out a little." He didn't reply. No blue ticks, nothing. I told myself he was probably still in a meeting or driving between appointments. I tried to busy myself, wipe the counter, rinse the dish, stack Tupperware, but every small noise made me jump. I found myself watching the top of the stairs, the line of the hallway, the reflections in picture glass as if they might betray a movement. Once, in a corner of a frame, I thought I saw someone pass, but when I blinked, it was only the bend of a curtain catching light. At exactly 5:40, a sound slammed into the quiet and rearranged everything, a loud, unmistakable rattle from upstairs. My stomach dropped. It was the sound the closet made when one of the sliding doors was loose at the bottom, a very specific metallic bang when the track caught and the panel shook. I know that noise the way I know the clap of rain on the conservatory roof. Someone had just made it. Air left my lungs. My hands trembled so much I had to steady myself on the kitchen island. I didn't pause. I didn't wait to tell myself not to be silly. I grabbed my phone and ran out the kitchen door, barefoot, heart pounding so hard it felt like someone else was beating inside my chest. I didn't even close the door behind me. I sprinted down the path and onto the pavement and dialed before I stopped moving. "Emergency services, what's your emergency?" the operator asked. I think someone's in my house," I said, words jagged, breath thin. "I heard something upstairs. In the closet. I'm at 12 Ashby Lane, please, I don't want to go back in." "Okay, stay on the line for me," she said calmly. "Do not go back inside." "Are you safe where you are?" "Yes, outside, at the curb." My voice sounded small in the empty street. I felt ridiculous and foolish and terrified all at once, like I was both overreacting and absolutely right. Within 10 minutes, 2 officers in reflective jackets pulled up. They asked me everything, what I'd seen, heard, if I'd touched anything. Then they went in with torches and gloves. I stood on the pavement and watched the blue lights blink against the hedges and tried not to vomit. 15 minutes later, one of them came back out. He looked pale in the way people do after they've seen something they wish they hadn't. "You were right to call," he said simply. "We found evidence in the closet behind the far end of the sliding doors." He used the official words. They found a stain on a blouse I hadn't worn in months, traces on the inside of the door. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Semen. He said it quietly, clinically, like it was a sample to be logged, but the meaning hit harder than any blunt sentence could. He'd been hiding in there, watching. They didn't find him in the house. They did find muddy footprints that ran from our back gate into the woods, a messy, crooked trail that implied patience more than panic. Forensics swabbed and collected and promised to run DNA through the system. I felt like I was moving underwater, numb, slow, the world too far away to touch. The officer later told me, in a low voice, that if I hadn't left when I did, things could have gone very differently. That sank into me and stuck. Whoever had been in my closet had not been there to take valuables. He'd been hiding, waiting. The idea of that closeness and of someone sitting behind my jackets and watching me move about my house made my skin crawl in a new, private way. Ryan met me at the station. I remember him folding around me, his arms a small, hot, solid thing to cling to as I fell apart. I sobbed against his chest until I couldn't make noises anymore. That night we slept at his brother's house. I didn't sleep for weeks after that. Exhaustion came in fits between replaying small moments, leaving the conservatory door ajar, the sound of the dryer, the sandwich still on the plate. We changed every lock, installed cameras and motion sensor lights, and Ryan pushed for a big rescue dog from a shelter, a creature who thumped its way around the house and made real, audible presence in rooms I'd thought were private. I started therapy to talk about the new, raw edges of my life. 3 weeks later, the police called. They'd found him. His name was Dennis L., 41, with a history of stalking, public indecency, and harassment. He didn't live nearby. His address was a 40-minute drive away. The detective said he targeted women who moved predictably, who had routines he could study. He told them he'd been watching our garden because it gave him cover. He'd seen me hang laundry, seen me stretch in the conservatory, seen me doze on the couch. When they arrested him, he told the officers something that still makes my stomach twist. I didn't mean to scare her. I just wanted to be near her. He received 2 years, maybe 3, with parole and probation tacked on. The sentence felt small compared to what I felt had been taken. The naturalness of walking through my own house without measuring shadows. Now, at 29, habits have hardened into rituals. I check doors twice before bed. I listen to the hollow places in my chest and treat them like warnings. Windows that used to be propped open for fresh air are closed and latched even on bright afternoons. We live with cameras and alarms and more light on our paths. I still startle at small sounds, and sometimes I catch myself peering at closet doors longer than I should. You don't believe it can happen in your quiet town until it does. It only takes one small choice, a door left ajar, a moment of complacency, and someone who watches will take advantage. So lock your doors even in the daytime, even when it feels silly, even when you think you're safe. Because once someone is watching, you might never know until it's almost too late. I was 8 years old the first time I understood just how fragile the feeling of safety really was. Back then, my family lived in a little town in Oregon called Rayners Hollow. It was the kind of place tucked between tall evergreens and fog-heavy mornings, quiet enough that people rarely locked their doors at night. Neighbors waved from porches, claimed to know each other's lives, and most of the kids funneled through the same small school, kindergarten through 5th grade. That's where I met Leo Walters. Leo and I grew close in 2nd grade. He wasn't the class clown or the kid everyone gathered around, but he was steady. The kind of friend who listened and never made you feel stupid for saying something weird. We traded Pokemon cards like they were currency, rode bikes until the streetlights came on, and pretended to do homework side by side while really talking about cartoons. One Friday in early spring, on one of those evenings when the daylight stretched but the air still bit cold, I got invited to sleep over at his house. I was thrilled. My mom packed my Spider-Man sleeping bag, pajamas, a toothbrush, and my Game Boy Advance into a small overnight bag. She reminded me she'd have to pick me up before 10 the next morning because of work. I didn't care. 10 hours at Leo's house felt like forever. His house stood a few blocks from school in a neighborhood where the sidewalks tilted and tree roots cracked the pavement. 2 stories, gray siding, a small porch with one step that moaned under your weight. His mom, Melissa, opened the door with her usual warmth. His dad, Greg, was working late, nothing unusual about that. Then there was Sophie, Leo's 4-year-old sister, who floated around the house clutching dolls or staring wide-eyed at Disney movies, usually quiet enough to forget she was there. That night started like every other sleepover. We inhaled frozen pizza, washed it down with Capri Suns, and put on Home Alone in the living room. We still laughed at the slapstick traps like we hadn't watched it 10 times before. Around 9:30, Melissa kissed us goodnight and carried Sophie upstairs. Leo and I set up camp in the living room. That was tradition. The cushions made good forts, and being near the big TV felt cooler than sleeping in his room. By 10:15, Leo was out, buried deep in his sleeping bag beside the couch. I wasn't tired. That wasn't surprising. Even as a kid, my brain spun faster at night. I lay there staring at the ceiling, watching shadows crawl up the walls, listening to the silence press in. No hum of appliances, no ticking clocks, just a heavy, almost unnatural stillness. Time slipped by. Maybe half an hour, maybe more. Then came the sound, a click. Faint, so soft I almost thought I imagined it, but sharp enough to freeze me. It sounded like a latch, metal meeting metal. My eyes darted toward the kitchen. The noise had come from the back near the garage door that opened into the pantry. From where I lay, I couldn't see it. The kitchen wrapped around the corner. My first thought was Melissa. Maybe she'd come back downstairs. Maybe she forgot something. But the stairs hadn't creaked, and Greg wasn't supposed to be home yet. I stayed completely still, every muscle locked. My ears strained, desperate. Then footsteps. Soft, careful, not rushed, not heavy, but deliberate. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My heart thudded so hard I thought it might wake Leo. My eyes locked on the dark hallway, braced for someone to step into view, to finally reveal themselves. No one did. I whispered Leo's name into the dark beside the couch. Leo, Leo? He didn't answer at first, so I nudged his shoulder until he shifted. Huh? He mumbled, voice thick with sleep. Leo, I said, urgent and small. I think someone came in through the garage. He blinked, sat up, rubbing his eyes. Is it my dad? He asked. No, I whispered. He's not supposed to be back until later, right? He nodded, waking. We listened, then crept toward the kitchen, moving quietly. We stopped when the hallway narrowed into shadow. Leo peered around the corner and jerked me back with his elbow. I think someone left, he said. What do you mean? I asked. The garage door had closed. We'd heard it thud. We edged closer and looked into the dark kitchen. The light was off. Everything seemed normal, but I could feel that something had been there. Without thinking, Leo darted forward and checked the garage door lock. Click. Then he ran for his mom. I stayed where I was, heart beating loud in my throat. A minute later, he came back with Melissa, hair mussed, still half asleep. What's happening? She asked, instantly alert. Leo rushed through it. I added the details, voice small. Melissa listened, puzzled at first, then steely with concern. She went out to the garage and flipped on the overhead light. Empty, she called. The car was in its place. Tools hung neat. Nothing was overturned. She walked the yard with a flashlight and checked the side gate. The latch held. When she came back, she said, a little forced, "There's nothing out here." She looked at us, weighing our fear against the ordinary facts. "Maybe you imagined it," she suggested, trying to calm us. Leo relocked the door and crawled back into his sleeping bag. He was asleep within 10 minutes. I was not. Every small sound, the house settling, a distant car, a floorboard, made my skin tighten. I lay watching the hallway and counting breaths to steady myself. After a while, a new sound scraped across the dark. A soft jiggling at the garage knob, careful and patient, like someone testing it. The lock held. Silence followed. I couldn't move. It felt like someone pressing at the rim of my chest. Somehow I dozed later, enough for morning to come. Sunlight poured through the blinds and the house seemed reasonable again. Leo ate cereal at the table when I joined him. "You okay?" he asked. I told him about the knob. He went pale. We told Melissa once more. She checked the garage again. Locked. Ordinary. "Okay," she said, trying to make it so. 2 weeks later, a house down the block had been broken into. The family was away. Someone forced a back door open. Nothing valuable was missing, but the place had been rummaged. Shoes left by the hallway, a cabinet open, the family dog nudged out of its kennel. The police asked questions and left without answers. After that, Leo's dad put a camera in the garage and bolted the side gate with a padlock. I never stayed the night at Leo's again. Not only because I was scared, though I was, but because that quiet, thick stillness where you know someone was there without proof felt like a bruise I didn't want to press. Years later in high school, we talked about it again. Leo told me something he'd kept back. After we settled that night, Sophie had woken and said she'd seen someone pass her open bedroom door. She told them goodnight. The person didn't answer. She remembered only a shadow and slow footsteps moving down the hall. Sometimes the most frightening things in childhood aren't monsters under beds, but people who test doors quietly and walk past those they love without making a sound. After that night, I noticed small, persistent changes that didn't make noise but made rooms feel different. Melissa kept the keys in a bowl by the door and checked locks twice. Leo's father talked less at dinner, his gaze often on the windows. I stopped leaving my bike in their yard and started sleeping with the lamp on at home, the light a tiny island against the dark. The memory clung like a smell, faint but present whenever I passed a garage or heard a knob being tested. Even now, the imagined weight at the end of a hallway makes my throat tighten. I never thought that Road Trip would carve itself into my memory the way it did. Not for the scenery, not for the freedom, but for the quiet, creeping horror that almost swallowed me out there, alone, in the middle of nowhere. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Leah. At the time, I was doing something most people only daydream about but never actually commit to, a solo cross-country road trip. I had just turned 28, single, between jobs, stuck in that gray zone of life where you're not quite sure who you are or where you're going. So I did the one thing that felt right. I packed up my beat-up little Honda, scribbled a route through national parks and cheap motels, highlighted a few roadside diners, and just drove. At first it was liberating. No schedules, no boss, no endless stream of emails. Just me, the road, and the hum of my tires. But silence has a way of turning sour. The longer you sit in it, the heavier it feels. By the second week, I had made my way deep into rural Arkansas. It wasn't a part of the state I knew, just miles of forest, rolling hills, and tiny towns with population signs barely reaching 2 digits. My phone had been dropping service more and more as the sun started lowering itself into the trees. By late afternoon, around 5:30, I pulled into a gas station to fill up. My plan was simple. Grab a snack, check for motels nearby, and crash for the night. I should have stayed there. The man behind the counter barely looked at me. Polite enough, but there was a coldness, a kind of distance. Then, as I walked back to my car, I noticed the guy at the pump behind mine. He just stared. Didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't even look away when I caught his eyes. I brushed it off. People are different in the South, right? They keep to themselves. That's what I told myself. But when I pulled out of the lot, I noticed headlights sliding into the road behind me. Same old pickup. Hood dented in like it had lived through too many fights. I slowed down a little, gave him space to pass. He didn't. He just stayed tucked behind me. When I glanced at my phone, my stomach dropped. The corner of the screen read SOS, no signal, no GPS, no way to call for help. Just fading light, endless trees, and a stranger's truck filling my rearview mirror. I forced myself to stay calm. A few miles later, I spotted a small green highway sign. Talcott, 12 May. Relief washed over me. Even a town that tiny would have something. A diner, maybe a bar still open, somewhere with people. I flicked on my blinker and took the exit. That's when things turned worse. The road narrowed almost instantly, twisting into the forest. My headlights cut through nothing but walls of trees. I kept darting my eyes to the rearview mirror, waiting for those headlights to swing into view behind me. But the road stayed black, empty. Talcott wasn't what I pictured. It was barely a town at all. One sagging street, a shuttered diner, a leaning post office, a general store that looked ready to collapse, and a gas station with pumps so rusted they seemed fossilized. No lights, no people, dead quiet. Still, I pulled into the lot of the gas station, heart hammering. My palms were slick against the steering wheel. I rolled my windows halfway down, desperate for a bar of service. Anything. Nothing. Just silence and the hum of my cooling engine. And then, movement. 2 men stood in the middle of the road, just beyond the glow of my headlights. Not by the store. Not near the pumps. Just there, blocking the way out. Neither had headlights. No reflective gear. They weren't moving. They weren't talking. One was tall, broad-shouldered, posture straight as a wall. The other was thinner, slightly hunched, his head cocked at an angle. Every nerve in my body screamed. There's no way to explain that gut-deep recognition. The one that doesn't rely on logic. My body knew something before my brain would admit it. This was wrong. Dangerous. My thumb hit the lock button on instinct. I sat frozen, watching. Hoping maybe they'd step aside. Hoping maybe they were just passing through. Then the taller one moved. Slow, deliberate, a single step closer. The hunched one followed, dragging his feet slightly. I cracked the window just an inch, my voice trembling. "Hey, everything okay out there?" Nothing. No reply. Instead, the taller one peeled off to the left of my car. The hunched one mirrored him on the right. My throat went dry. "Hey, back off," I shouted, my voice sharper now but shaking. I fumbled with the gear shift, slamming my car into reverse. My breath hitched when I saw the leaner man stoop down and lift something from the dirt. Metal glinted in the beam of my headlights. Something long, something heavy. The tall one suddenly surged forward, a blur of movement against the dark. That was it. Instinct took over. I stomped on the gas, wheels screeching as I jerked backward. The tall man lunged toward my hood just as I cranked the wheel, swerving hard. My tires spat gravel, the car bouncing off the road and into the grass. I didn't care if I wrecked the suspension or tore the bumper off. I cut the wheel again, shot back onto the cracked asphalt and floored it, heart pounding, breath ragged, as the dark swallowed the figures behind me. The second man flung something into the road behind me. It hit the asphalt with a sharp clatter and skipped once, twice. I saw it in the rear view. The shape caught the light and flashed metallic. A spike strip. like the ones cops use in movies to stop cars. It landed maybe 5 feet behind my bumper. I felt my stomach drop so hard it left me dizzy. They weren't cops. They'd set that there on purpose. I didn't slow down. I kept my foot buried until the highway reappeared in front of me, and the tires hummed back onto smoother pavement. Every glance in the mirror felt like a risk. My heart thudded in my throat and in my ears so loudly I could barely hear the engine. There were no headlights following, just that empty 2-lane swallowed by trees, the road disappearing as if it never had a name. After what felt like forever, my phone bars came back. 15 minutes later, I pulled over at the next exit ramp and dialed 911 with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I told them everything. The truck. The men, the spike strip, gave them the nearest exit name. Spoke as clearly as I could make myself. The dispatcher asked if I was safe. I lied and said yes because the alternative felt like admitting I was still scared. She promised an officer would check the area, but warned it was a long drive out there. I waited. Listened to the dispatcher's typing noise over the line until the call went quiet. I never got a follow-up. I didn't expect one. Sleep that night was practically non-existent. I jammed a chair under the motel door like you'd see in low-budget thrillers, and woke every hour to the sound of the AC clicking. The next morning I looked up Talcott while the coffee pot sputtered. Nothing useful came up. No Yelp reviews, no photos, just a dusty line in an old census database. Population 43. That small number didn't comfort me. It made the town feel like something scraped clean of people and left to settle into rot. 3 weeks later, I was home, but I still moved like someone who'd been waiting for a car to hit them. So when my mom asked if I could house sit for my grandma in Eagle Hollow, I almost said no. Grandma's place was gorgeous in that rustic way. 2 stories, a wide deck, cedar siding weathered soft, set off a small lake in Tennessee. It was remote. No neighbors you could hear, no streetlights, just water and trees. I figured quiet might be medicine. The first night, everything felt normal. I cooked, read, fell asleep halfway through a movie. Around 11:45 p.m., I wrapped a blanket around my knees, carried a beer out to the back deck, and settled into the chair. The stars were brilliant and the air held that heavy summer warmth. Not even crickets were making a fuss. Then I heard it. A small metallic clink, like a chain brushing wood. It came from the dock. I squinted into the dark. The lake drank light. Only a black shape suggested the boathouse and the old rowboat floating by the dock. I flipped on the deck light. Nothing except the water. I was about to go back inside when a tiny flicker, maybe a flashlight, danced down by the boathouse. Someone shouldn't have been out there. My phone had 1 bar. I tried calling the sheriff. The call dropped twice. The memory of Talcott sat heavy in my chest. My mom had once told me, half joking, half serious, there was a revolver in the drawer under the sink, if anything ever felt off. I opened that drawer like a person opening a ledger of future emergencies, found the revolver, checked it, loaded it with hands that moved on autopilot. The metal was colder than I expected. It made the decision real. I stepped back out onto the deck and called into the dark, voice louder than I'd meant it to be. "Hey, you're on private property." The words hung out there and the water swallowed them. The beam of someone's flashlight bobbed again. Then a figure detached from the dock silhouette and walked slowly toward the shore. Tall, thin, hands sunk into his pockets like he was enjoying an evening stroll, not trespassing. His pace was casual, deliberate. "Stop right there," I yelled, making sure he could see me. He didn't stop. I raised the gun. My hands were steady because they had to be. "Get back," I said. "I have a gun." He kept coming. I fired a warning shot up to the left, just a sharp crack that ricocheted through the trees. The sound snapped the night like a twig. He halted, then raised his hands slowly. When he spoke, his voice was low and even. "Easy now. Don't do anything crazy." There was an odd flatness to him, too calm. No breathlessness, no rush like he'd rehearsed 1,000 slow approaches. I kept the barrel level, my fingers tense. "Who are you? What do you want?" I demanded. He smiled in a small, careless way that didn't reach his eyes. "Just passing through," he said. "No one passes through here," I told him. The words felt like they belonged to a different person, someone once brave enough to mean them. He gave me one long look, then turned and walked back into the dark without hurry. Not running, not looking over his shoulder, just a silhouette folding back into the woods as if the trees were expecting him. I locked every door, pushed a chair against the interior of the back door, and sat in the living room with the lights on until Son picked apart the night. He never came back. Months have passed. I'm quieter now, in the way a person learns to avoid particular rooms in their mind. I keep the gas tank full, never letting it dip below half on long drives. My phone rarely leaves my hand. If it drops to less than 30%, I start rationing like a survivalist. The glove box holds pepper spray and a legal stun gun now, and the revolver sits at my mom's. A reminder I don't want puncturing normal life. Mostly, I've started to listen to that thin, stupid animal part of me that knows before my brain does. I don't know who those men were or what they planned when they blocked a road in Talcott. I don't know if the man by the lake was connected, or if 1,000 strangers could move through the woods with the same impossible calm. What I do know is that they weren't amateurs. They were precise, patient, and quiet, qualities that make people dangerous in ways intimidation can't. So please, if you're alone on a back road and something makes your stomach twist, don't wait for a sign or proof. Trust that little ugly feeling. Turn your key, drive. Don't give them the time to make the plan perfect. I hadn't planned on staying that long. The whole trip was supposed to be a quick reset. A weekend at my grandfather's lake house, 2 nights max. My name's Riley Ward. I'm 24, a grad student in Chicago, and lately I've been worn thin from too many late nights buried in research papers and the kind of breakup you don't bring up unless someone drags it out of you. My grandfather, Henry Ward, is 78 and still stubborn as hell. He lives alone at Lake Bellamy, a remote stretch of water tucked away in the northern Minnesota woods. The lake is beautiful, peaceful even, but it has this unsettling stillness to it that you don't notice right away. It isn't like those crowded resort towns where cabins sit shoulder to shoulder and boat engines buzz across the water from dawn to dusk. Lake Bellamy is almost forgotten, hidden at the end of a 5-mile dirt road that cuts through miles of pine forest. By the time you've driven past the ranger's gate 3 miles back, you're gone from the world. No neighbors, no passing traffic, just silence and trees. Grandpa's house is the very last one before the road disappears into the woods altogether. After my grandma died, he chose this solitude over city life. He said the world was getting too loud, too nosy, too fast, and honestly, I couldn't argue. I remember the first time I came up here alone when I was 17. The darkness unsettled me. No streetlights, no cars, no glow from a neighbor's porch, just black sky and the endless hum of crickets. Back then it made me uneasy, but this time I thought I could handle it. I got there on a Friday evening, mid-October. Most of the leaves had fallen, though a few stubborn patches of red and orange still clung to the branches. The air had that sharp cold that carries a smell with it. Earthy, metallic, like winter was standing just outside the tree line, waiting to be let in. Grandpa met me on the porch in his usual flannel shirt and thick wool socks, hand extended for a firm shake. He's never been a hugger. "Glad you made it before nightfall," he said, glancing up at the low rolling clouds. Then he added with that dead serious look he always got, "And you're just in time. Place gets damn spooky when the moon's out and the wind howls." I laughed, tried to brush it off, but he wasn't joking. He said it the way other people might remind you to lock the doors. It carried that same quiet warning he used to mutter when he told me not to go into town after dark. Dinner was stew, thick, simple, filling. We ate in near silence, then settled into the living room and watched old westerns on his VHS player, the screen fuzzy with dust. It felt good, honestly, to be cut off from my phone and social media for once. No buzzing notifications, no constant tug of things that didn't matter. That night, I went to bed early in the upstairs guest room. The room faced the lake, with a small balcony that overlooked the dock and the ring of pine trees around it. Grandpa had reinforced the balcony door a few years back after a storm tore it open one night. Now it had both a latch and a thick wooden beam you could set across it for extra security. I didn't bother with the beam. It didn't feel necessary. I slept fine, at least until Sunday night. That evening the sky was clear, the lake flat and glassy. Grandpa turned in early, mumbling something about his back aching. I stayed outside a while longer, bundled in a hoodie with a thermos of hot cocoa in my hands. The back patio overlooked the water, and for a while I just listened to the breeze move through the trees. I had a playlist running on my phone, soft instrumental tracks that made it easy to unwind. It was close to midnight, 11:45 maybe, when I saw it. A flicker down by the dock, Not bright, just a quick flash like the spark of a lighter or the glow of a phone screen turning on. I froze, leaned forward, squinting into the dark. Nothing. The water reflected the moonlight, and for a second I told myself it must have been that. A trick of the lake. I went back to scrolling through old texts from my ex, half hating myself for still doing it. Then came the sound. Clank, metal on metal. Subtle but sharp enough to cut through the night. My head jerked toward the boathouse. It sat maybe 40 yards down the slope of the lawn, a squat wooden structure with a single warped door and one window half hidden by moss and spiderwebs. No reason there should have been any sound from down there. I set my thermos down, turned off the music, and slipped inside the house, standing near the screen door with my breath caught in my throat, listening. Another clank, louder this time, made my chest tighten. It's the same small panic you feel when you hear a noise in your empty apartment, and your brain fills the silence with worst-case scenarios. You freeze, listen harder, and try to make rational explanations before panic takes over. Grandpa's revolver lived in the cabinet above the fridge. He'd shown it to me once and said he hoped he'd never need it, but liked knowing it was there. I climbed onto a stool, opened the cabinet, and took the old .38 out. It was loaded. The cold weight of it in my hand clarified everything. This was no longer hypothetical. I didn't want to shoot anyone. I only wanted whoever was down there to leave. I stepped onto the patio, the barrel hidden at my hip, and called out as steady as I could. "Hey, this is private property." The light near the dock blinked and then stayed on, a steady beam like a flashlight. Someone was there. "I'm armed," I added. "You need to leave now." For a moment, only the trees answered. Then a tall, thin man walked onto the dock. He wasn't holding a flashlight. His hands were empty. Still, a pale, bluish glow seemed to hang behind him, like a faint lamp suspended just above the water, casting him into wrong, sharp angles. I pointed the gun and told him to turn around and go. He moved slowly, deliberately, like someone used to walking with purpose. I fired. The shot cracked the night and my ears rang. I'd aimed high on purpose, a warning, not a hit. He stopped, lifted his hands. He didn't look afraid. He looked still. "Take it easy," he said. His voice was gravelly, like someone who hadn't spoken in a while. "Get the hell off this property," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now." He tilted his head as if studying me. "What do you want?" I demanded louder, the fear sharpening my tone. "Nothing. Just the wind," he said. Then he turned and walked toward the tree line beside the dock. No stumbling, no flashlight, nothing but his silhouette folding into the dark as if he belonged there. I didn't sleep that night. I locked every door and window, wedged a chair under my bedroom knob, and kept the lamp on until dawn. In the morning, I told Grandpa. "Tall, skinny man," he repeated, stirring his coffee. "Didn't recognize him?" "No," I said. "He wasn't drunk or a kid, just off." Grandpa went quiet. After a minute, he said, "About 10 years ago, a local fisherman capsized in a storm. They found him tangled in the reeds a week later." "You think it was a ghost?" I asked. He gave a small, tired smile. "I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe some places keep their memories. Sometimes folks come back to them." We walked down to the dock. There were muddy footprints, one set with shoes, another set barefoot, pressed into the board like an impression from a different temperature. "Was he barefoot?" Grandpa asked. "I don't know," I said. We never saw the man again. A few months later, Grandpa called and told me an old oil lantern had been left on the dock. No note, no extra prints, but still warm to the touch. It felt like a message with no sender. It's been 3 years since that night. Grandpa died peacefully last spring. The house is mine now. I go back sometimes, but I don't stay overnight. No matter how many times I tell myself the dark tricks me, I can't unsee the way he looked, like someone waiting for something. And I can't shake the thought that if he comes back, he might not leave this time. And sometimes, on quiet nights, I think I hear the lake answering differently. I was barely a baby the first time something like that happened. My parents were loading the truck one afternoon when a gun in the bed somehow misfired. It blew through my mother's wrist, top and bottom, then continued on and hit my left foot. The surgeon later told my parents it was a miracle I still had a foot. They wrapped it in that kind of gentle, stunned wonder grown-ups use to make a terrible thing make sense. Maybe it was a miracle. Maybe it was the first stitch in a pattern. My life orbiting around accidents and bad luck, small violences that always seemed to brush me like static. Fast forward 34 years. It was March 2018. David, my fiancé, and I were living in a rented one-story house at the edge of a quiet, cracked neighborhood in southern Missouri. David did construction and left before sunrise most days. He took sleeping pills to knock himself out after long shifts. I'd been knocked sideways by the worst ear infection I'd ever had. Days of waking in waves of sharp stabbing pain. I hadn't slept more than 20 minutes at a time. Laying my head flat made me cry like a kid. But that Thursday night I finally passed out. Heavy, dreamless, blissfully numb sleep. Then something ripped me out of it. I don't remember a full wake-up. Only that fog you get when the world slides from sleep to panic. I heard a noise at first, something like footsteps or the scrape of metal. I thought David had gotten up to pee and rolled toward him without even opening my eyes. Then came shouting, muffled at first, then closer. My name, something else, weird when a voice low and urgent. My ears were clogged. My head felt full of cotton. It didn't click until words cut through clear as a bell. Give me the money. That wasn't David. That wasn't the TV. Cops don't say it like that. Something electric ran through me. I threw my feet to the floor the same second the bedroom door slammed. David, completely naked, shoved it closed and braced his weight like some ridiculous, terrified animal. He shouted back into the hallway, and when his words landed in the dark, my heart did a stupid flip. "They've got a gun," he said, eyes huge. "Get the gun!" For half a second I understood it wrong, thought he meant their gun. Then the house answered with sharp, awful pops. Pop, pop, gunshots inside our home. David held the door shut with one hand, moving that quick, spidering way people do when they're trying not to be hit. Bullets pounded the walls. Drywall exploded into dust. One round ripped through the top corner of the doorframe. "Get our gun!" he screamed. I fumbled for the switch, light flaring on. My hands were shaking so hard they might as well have been someone else's. I crawled under the bed, fingers scraping the floor, and found the small pistol we kept for emergencies. The only reason I knew where it was because I'd cleaned under there a few weeks before. I handed it up, and David grabbed it like a man who'd been holding his breath his whole life. Time hiccuped. Everything slowed. He cracked the door open a hair and peered into the hall. Silence had settled like a hand, weird, complete. Whoever they were had bolted. No more shouting, no more popping, just the distant slam of a door and the faint rattle of metal, like keys or chains as they ran. They'd gone out the back, the one door my idiot roommate Corey always left unlocked. The house was a war zone. Blood streaked the hallway wall, not theirs, but David's. A bright, ridiculous smear that made everything feel unreal. 2 of the 6 rounds had nicked him. One grazed his shoulder, the other ripped shallow across his hip. I remember the tremor in my hands so violently that my teeth banged together as I pressed a dish towel to the smaller wound, trying to stop the flow while he, gun still warm in his grip, edged through each room like a man moving through cold water. Corey stumbled out of his bedroom only after the last echo faded, hair mussed, eyes huge and blank. I lost whatever control I had left. I screamed at him until my throat burned, questions spilling over each other. "Why didn't you lock the door? Didn't you hear anything? How could you just leave it unlocked?" My voice sounded like a stranger's in my ears. He didn't have answers. He swayed where he stood, pale as the sheets, fumbling for words that wouldn't come. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the living room in a tense, buzzing silence until blue lights arrived. 40 minutes that felt like years. The officers moved with the efficient detachment of people who see trauma all the time. They took our statements, traced the bullet holes, and told us what they always tell people. Probably a robbery gone wrong, probably addicts looking for cash, probably random. Probably, they said, as if the word could sew the torn edges back together. They found shell casings by the back door and one slug still lodged in the living room wall like a permanent, ugly punctuation mark. The men were gone, as if the house had swallowed them. We moved out the next month. David couldn't go back to work for weeks. I dressed his wounds every morning, cleaning and wrapping him with hands that refused to stop trembling. We bought a security system, adopted Roxy, a German shepherd who slept like a sentry and didn't tolerate nonsense, and we started the habit that has stuck with me, a wooden chair wedged against the bedroom doorknob every night. Even now in our new place, I shove a chair under the knob before I crawl into bed. It's ridiculous and it's necessary. He hadn't been supposed to be home that night. He'd been visiting family in Florida and changed his plans at the last minute. That small arbitrary decision sits on my chest like a weight I can't move. If he'd stayed gone, I would have been alone. Deep, drugged sleep, practically deaf in one ear from the infection, unaware until it was too late. Sometimes I wake convinced that if I'd slept through it, the story would have ended differently and much worse. People use the word accident when they want distance from the sharp edges of things, but accidents leave patterns. My mother took a stray bullet for me when I was an infant, a cruel fluke, and 34 years later someone I love bleeds in my hallway because I was sleeping and he came home. It's always the people I care about who get hurt. That idea terrifies me more than bad luck. The thought that the next person to stand between me and danger might not walk away with just a graze. Now I have nightmares. Shadows at the edge of the yard look like men. Every sudden noise, a knock, a floorboard's groan, the clink of a bottle in the sink, makes my scalp prickle. David is better. The physical scars faded and his nights stopped full of the quick, rehearsed jerks of men who have seen a gun. But I'm still standing in that doorway in my pajamas listening for the pops that will not leave me. I still replay the choice he made to come back over and over, each time rearranging the cruelty of it in my head. To the two men who came into our house with guns, you invaded a place that should have felt safe. I hope you never sleep easily again. As for me, I haven't. I never thought much about fear until the night it came for me, quietly without warning like a shadow slipping into a well-lit room. Back then in 2007, I was just 11 years old. We had just moved into a 2-story fixer-upper on the corner of Kestrel Avenue, tucked in a quiet neighborhood in the town of Whitlock, Oregon. The place was old, built sometime in the 1920s, and it carried that kind of vintage charm people gush about on renovation shows, creaky floors that always gave you away, antique glass doorknobs that felt too fragile to twist, and a fireplace we never touched, because none of us trusted it was safe. My parents, Eric and Denise Collins, bought the place mostly for its location. It was only a 10-minute walk to Whitlock Middle School, and it gave both of them a straight shot to work. My dad worked long shifts at the packaging plant, and my mom was a part-time nurse with shifts that changed week to week. I was starting 6th grade, and they always said I was mature for my age. Honestly, I was. I didn't pick fights, didn't screw around at school, and I even washed dishes without being told. I liked reading. I liked rules. So when my parents said I'd start staying home alone for a few hours after school, I wasn't nervous. I was excited. To me, it felt like freedom. At 11, that kind of trust was a badge of honor. At first, nothing ever felt wrong. I'd get home, kick off my sneakers, toss my backpack on the old couch, and either finish homework or fire up Mario Kart Wii. My parents would usually stumble in around 7 or 8. Tired but grateful dinner was easy. Those hours in between felt like my time, quiet, predictable, mine. But that changed one night in early October. That day had been nothing special, just the usual. It rained after lunch and the sky stayed smothered in heavy gray clouds. I remember staring out my classroom window, tapping my pencil against the desk, watching the sky bruise darker. Mr. Hargrove, my science teacher, announced the date of our midterm. I wasn't too worried. Science always came easier than math. By the time I got home, it was about 3:45. The sidewalks were still slick, and my sneakers squeaked as I let myself inside. The living room window was fogged over, the kind of fog you draw shapes in with your finger. I dropped my backpack on the dining table, grabbed a granola bar, and reminded myself I'd be alone for hours. Dad wouldn't get off his night shift until close to 10:30, and Mom had plans with friends, dinner and a movie. I barely thought twice about it. By 5, the storm broke open. Not drizzle, not a light rain, the kind of downpour that made the gutters choke and spit. The wind howled so hard the trees outside thrashed like they were alive. I paused my game, stepped to the back window and muttered, "Dang." The whole sky lit up white, followed by thunder that cracked late and low, deep enough to knot my stomach. It wasn't the storm that bothered me, though. It was the way the house seemed to bend with it, the windows rattling, the floorboards groaning louder than they should. Even though my brain told me it was just wind, my gut said otherwise. I pulled out my phone and texted Mom. "Hey, it's storming bad. You okay?" Her reply came quick. "All good, honey. Don't forget to lock the back door. Love you." I got up, double-checked the door, turned the knob just to be sure, locked. I let out a breath and went back to the living room. Around 6:20, I got hungry. I paused the game and headed toward the kitchen. The hallway that connected to it was dim, lit only by the fading gray light bleeding in through the windows. That's when I saw it. The pantry light was on. It was one of those tiny walk-in pantries with a pull-chain bulb, and we never left it on. I froze, staring at the pale yellow glow spilling across the floor. I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no shifting, just rain slamming the windows and thunder rolling somewhere far off. Slowly, I crept toward the kitchen. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. I leaned around the corner, and that's when I saw him. A man, crouched by the pantry. I didn't scream, I couldn't. My throat locked tight the second I saw him. He wasn't anyone I knew. He looked mid-30s. Tall, skin pale and wet like he'd just clawed his way out of the storm. His soaked white t-shirt clung to him like it was painted on, and in his hand was something that froze me harder than his presence, a hammer. One of my dad's hammers from the toolbox in the garage. He didn't look at me. Or maybe he did, but he didn't show it. He just crouched there, dripping silent. I stepped back, slow, so slow it felt like one wrong move would betray me. My whole body wanted to bolt, but my legs felt made of glass. My bare feet made no sound on the hardwood floor. But every creak in the hallway felt like a shout I couldn't control. I made it back upstairs and darted into my bedroom. My fingers shook as I grabbed the cordless phone from my nightstand and dialed 911. The operator answered fast, calm and practiced. "Whitlock 911, what's your emergency?" she asked. "There's someone in my house," I whispered. "I don't know who he is. He has a hammer." She asked for my address. I gave it. "Can you describe him?" "He's tall, wearing a wet white shirt. I think he broke in." "Where are you now?" she asked. "Upstairs in my room, hiding." Her voice was steady. She said officers were on the way, but the storm might slow them. "Can you lock your door?" I turned the knob with numb fingers. Locked. I crawled into the closet and pulled the door shut, pressing myself behind a stack of board games. The dark smelled like dust and old cardboard. I hugged my knees and tried to make myself small. My heart pounded so loud I thought the man might hear it through the walls. The operator stayed on the line in whispers, telling me to stay still and counting how long the officers would take. Minutes elongated and narrowed until I could measure everything by the sound outside my door. Heavy, deliberate footsteps climbed the stairs and stopped. Then a polite knock, too polite. A low voice, rough as gravel, called, "Hey there. You up here?" It sounded almost neighborly at first. "Come on, open the door." The knock came harder. "Don't make me break it down," he said. "It'll be too easy." I gripped the edge of a box until my fingers hurt. The operator's soft voice echoed, "They're on your street? Hang on." Then bang, he slammed into the door. Once, twice. The wood shuddered. "Let me in," he yelled. "I know you're in there." A scream tore out of me, shrill and raw. After that, things sped up. Voices from downstairs, firm, commanding, barked, "Police, drop it!" More banging, the sound of scuffling, a curse, then a heavy thud. Silence hit after like a door closing. Then a gentler knock at my bedroom. "It's the police," a woman said. "You're safe now." My body convulsed. I couldn't stop shaking. When I finally opened the door, a female officer knelt in front of me, rain-soaked and steady. "You're okay," she told me. And the single sentence untied something in my chest. Behind her, other officers wrestled the man into cuffs on the living room carpet. He was bigger than I remembered, soaked through, eyes raw and hateful. He didn't beg or explain. He only stared at me with a look that felt like blame. The officer put herself between us and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. The house smelled of wet wood and metal. My legs trembled. I couldn't stop. Mom arrived half an hour later, frantic and crying. The officers explained. The back latch had failed when shoved hard enough. I was sure I had locked it, and I had, but the rusted hardware gave way. He'd slipped in through the basement, taken a hammer from Dad's toolbox, then gone upstairs. They told us he had no ties to our family. He appeared transient, likely looking for shelter or food, maybe high. He had no prior connection to our house. He was arrested and later sent to prison. I never wanted to know the length. After that night, nothing felt the same. My parents never left me alone again. Even at 15, they only trusted the house after we put in cameras and better locks. I learned rituals. Check the back door twice, the deadbolt once more, pull the chain. When my fiancé leaves early, I still walk the rooms to triple check. Sometimes I sleep with my bedroom door locked. I'm 30 now. I have a fiancé and children. I tell the kids strict rules about strangers and doors. People call me overprotective. They don't know the sound of a hammer against a door, or how a voice can turn from neighborly to threatening. For years I woke from dreams hearing knocking, my chest raw and sweaty. The fear never left. It lives in small habits and a watchful list of do's and don'ts. I won't let my kids be left alone at that age. Not in this house, not anywhere. Some things don't go away. The ritual checks, the tightened hands on a doorknob, the way a pantry light makes me pause. Even now, sometimes while putting them to bed, I'll pause at the pantry door and breathe, convinced there's someone crouched behind it. Those seconds are the echo of that night, small, sharp reminders that changed how I live and who I let guard our quiet. I never believed in anything paranormal. Ghost stories were just that, stories, especially in my house. My dad was a no-nonsense science teacher, the type who broke every mystery down to atoms and equations. My mom leaned the other way, spiritual but not in a ghosts are real sense. More yoga, sage sticks, and herbal teas for cleansing energies. So yeah, you can imagine how insane I sounded when I told them what happened that night. It had only been a week since I started college. I didn't go far. Southdale Community College, a 15-minute drive from our house in Wawawa, Wisconsin. Not because I was scared to leave, but because I didn't want to stack up debt when I wasn't even sure what I wanted to major in yet. My schedule was packed with the usual general eds, English Comp, Psych 101, statistics, and an art elective I picked on a whim. That first day drained me. By the time I rolled back into the driveway around 4, my back ached from lugging books and my eyes burned from staring at PowerPoints. I kicked off my Vans, dumped my bag by my bedroom door, and collapsed face first on my bed. Didn't even bother taking off my jeans. I must have passed out instantly because the next thing I knew, Luna was barking. Luna's my dog, half beagle, half something else. A caramel-colored mutt with floppy ears and eyes that could guilt you into giving her the last bite of your sandwich. She's never been aggressive a day in her life. Sweet, clingy, the type to lick you raw before ever growling. I've had her since I was 15. She's seen me through breakups, panic attacks, and now my first week of college. And she doesn't bark. Not unless she's thrilled, like when she hears her leash jingle or my mom pulling into the driveway with groceries. But now, her bark was sharp, rhythmic, urgent. Groggy, I sat up, rubbed the grit out of my eyes. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, 5:38 p.m. I'd been out for barely an hour. "Luna," I called, my voice still gravelly. "What's up, girl?" She didn't stop. Her barks came from the hallway, closer to my parents' room. I swung my legs off the bed, stretched, and shuffled out. Our place isn't big. Single story, 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, living room, 2 bathrooms. I found Luna stiff as a statue outside my parents' bedroom, body tense, head pointed into their open door. The blinds leaked the last strands of daylight, stripes of shadow running across the floorboards. Her tail was rigid, ears pinned back, teeth bared. "What is it?" I whispered, crouching beside her. She didn't glance at me, just barked, raw, defensive, like she couldn't decide if she should bolt or attack. I leaned forward, heart climbing my throat, and peered into the room. Nothing. Curtains drawn. Closet closed. Bed made tight, my mom's borderline obsessive about that. Everything looked normal. But Luna was unraveling. Then, without warning, she let out a high, pained yelp and stumbled backward into my leg. I gasped, scooping her up. That's when I saw it, blood. Not much, but enough to churn my stomach. A thin gash cut across her left side, just under her rib cage. Shallow, but too clean to be from a scratch or a bump against furniture. My hands shook as I pressed her gently against me. She whimpered, trembling in my arms. I didn't think. Just grabbed my phone, keys, and Luna and bolted out the front door barefoot. I ended up in my car, engine off, parked halfway down the street. Luna curled in my lap, whimpering. My chest felt like it was caving in. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, waiting, almost certain I'd see someone or something standing in the window. First thought, someone broke in, but the locks were still set. Side gate closed. No broken glass. And what kind of intruder cuts a dog, then just disappears? Calling my parents wasn't an option. They were out in Milwaukee, some dinner event for my dad's school not due back until late. Instead, with shaking fingers, I dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was polite, calm, but I heard the doubt under her tone. I gave her my address, told her I thought someone was inside. 10 minutes later, a squad car slid up beside mine. 2 officers, one older, seasoned, the other young. Tense. Got out, guns drawn. Flashlights ready. I stayed on the sidewalk, Luna pressed against me, whispering over and over, "It's okay, baby. It's okay." Though I wasn't sure if I was reassuring her or myself, I still couldn't make myself believe it. The officers turned the house inside out and found nothing. No sign of forced entry, nothing missing, no footprints. No blood besides the tiny smear on Luna that could have been from anywhere. No damage. No intruder. The younger cop crouched beside her and squinted. Could she have scratched herself on something? A nail, a gap in the floorboard, he asked. I stared at Luna's shaking body and felt stupid saying it out loud, but maybe, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. But she was barking at something. She saw someone. The older officer looked at me for a long second, then tapped a pen on his pad. "We'll file a report," he said. "We'll keep it on record. If anything else happens, call us back." I wanted him to promise he'd come running if my house woke up again. He didn't. He gave me a card and a courteous, practiced look that meant he believed the version of the story with the clean evidence. Nothing. Still, I filed the report, not because I expected it to change anything, but because I needed the paper trail, the official acknowledgement that I wasn't just inventing this in a tired brain. When my parents came home around 9, I told them everything. I told them about Luna's barking, the way she had been fixed on the bedroom door, the yelp, the thin line of blood, and the police search that turned up. Nothing. I handed my dad the officer's card like proof. My mom's face tightened. She looked genuinely unsettled. My dad rubbed his temples and made that small dismissive sigh he always does when confronted with anything unquantifiable. "You're tired, kiddo," he said. "New routine, more stress. It's messing with your sleep." "Dad, I wasn't dreaming," I snapped before I could stop myself. My throat tightened. There was something in that room. Luna saw it. She got hurt. My mom's voice tried to find a middle ground. "Maybe she spooked herself," she offered. "Dogs do strange things sometimes." Her hands trembled a little as she refolded a dish towel. My dad's jaw worked. He wanted to fix it with logic and sleep and vitamin D. "You need rest," he said. "Cut back on the late nights." I wanted to scream that rest wouldn't erase the smell that clung to the hallway, or the way the air in their room had felt wrong, thick, like breath condensed into fog. Instead, I took Luna back to my room, shut the door, and locked it. That night, I left the lamp on and watched her like a lifeguard. Every tiny twitch in her ears set my heart racing. If her gaze tracked across the ceiling, I followed it, stomach tightening. Nothing else happened that night. Nothing the next. Not right away. But small, insistent things began to skew. Luna wouldn't cross the threshold of my parents' bedroom. If I tried to herd her past the hallway, she'd whine and drag at her leash as if invisible tacks lay in the carpet. I found myself waking at the same minute every night, 3:17 a.m., my alarm glowing like an accusation. No dreams preceded it. No sound woke me. The clock simply blinked at me until I sat up and stared at the ceiling. I told myself I was sleep conditioning, my body learning fear. Then came the smell. A few nights later, 5 days maybe, I got up to pee around 2:45 a.m. and walked past the living room when the air hit me. Rotting meat, hot and sour and impossibly close, like something had been left to die under the floorboards. I checked the trash, opened the fridge, sniffed at the microwave. Nothing. The smell pooled in the hallway, concentrated, like someone had opened a door to a room that was breathing out decay. It hung right outside my parents' door and made me retch. The next morning, I asked my mom casually, as if chatting about the weather, "Did you smell something last night?" She shook her head, buttering toast with the same ordinary rhythm. "No, maybe the disposal." I knew it wasn't the disposal. I knew the difference between stale garbage and something that carried the heat of death. Mentioning it turned the kitchen into a small trial. My parents offered tired theories. Rodents, the neighbor's trash, me being jumpy from college stress. I let them placate me because I wanted peace more than I wanted to be right. The breaking point came 2 nights ago. I was up late, hunched over my psych paper, and Luna slept at the foot of my bed in a taut, curled ball. Around 2:30 a.m., there was a soft knock at my window. Not the hollow thump of wind or a stray branch, but a careful, measured tap, like someone running a fingernail along glass. My room faces the backyard. Our motion light usually blinked on with any movement back there. This time it stayed dark. Luna lifted her head and growled low and mean, the kind of sound I'd never heard from her. Another knock, insistently deliberate. Then a voice. My name. Anya. Breathed, elongated, as if the syllables were being pulled through a slit. The hair on my arms stood up. I froze. I crept to the window with my phone flashlight in a shaking hand and didn't pull the blinds up at first, because I didn't want to give whatever was outside the satisfaction of being seen. When the voice came again, soft and close, Luna erupted, a barking so ferocious and sudden it was like being hit. I yanked the blinds up, swung the flashlight out over the yard, and checked the motion light. Nothing. No silhouette, no outline, no movement. Empty grass, my neighbor's fence line crisp in the beam. The porch was empty. Luna wasn't barking at the yard. She was barking at the closet. I turned slowly. The closet door was closed, as always, but the air in the room had changed. It felt thick, like biting into warm gelatin. Each breath was heavier than the last. My mouth filled with the metallic tang of adrenaline. I opened the closet and the smell slammed me. Rotten, sour, and immediate. I gagged and slammed the door shut, heart hammering so hard I thought it would tear through my ribs. I woke my parents. There was no logic that would make them come willingly. My dad was furious more at being pulled from sleep than at the idea of danger. He accused me of letting my imagination run wild after watching horror movies. Are you making a habit of waking us for your nightmares? He asked, voice edged with irritation. My mom told me not to feed the fear, to sleep with the lights on, to try a chamomile tea. I felt something brittle break inside me, the part that used to accept adult reassurance like a cure-all. I told them I wouldn't stay, that I was sleeping at my cousin Lena's house the next night, and they argued in that low, exhausted way parents do when their child's fear sits outside the walls like a guest they can't see. So here I am now, in Lena's spare room. Luna is curled up on the throw rug like a dog who's forgotten how to be afraid, and for the first time in days she's calm. Her breaths are even. She's the old dog I know again. Until that moment when her ears prick and she flicks them toward a corner, then relaxes like nothing happened. Maybe I am cracking under stress. Maybe this is some weird sleep disorder, a shared delusion between my imagination and the house. But I know what I smelled, what it sounded like. The way Luna saw something I couldn't. I know the precise, useless hour 3:17. I know the voice that said my name from the dark. And I know, with a certainty that makes my hands go cold when I think it, that something was in my parents' room and it didn't want to be seen. It wanted to be left alone, and it wanted to warn us away. I never thought darkness would startle me. I grew up in Dunvale, a quiet rural village tucked into the southern hills of Litterham County, where silence felt like a favor. My grandparents left me the old house, small, white, and stubbornly solid despite creaks in the floor and sagging eaves. It sat on a long, lopsided yard with a broken fence, 2 weathered sheds, and the forest pressing close behind it. The nearest neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, lived a good 20-minute walk down the lane. We weren't exactly close. I moved back full-time about 4 years ago, at 26 because the city had started to feel thin. Too many faces, too much noise, the odd certainty that someone was watching even when I was alone. Here I could breathe. Runa, my German Shepherd mix, was my real company. She wasn't just a dog. You keep us safe, don't you? I'd say some nights, and she'd thump her tail as if to say yes. She was family, protector, and weirdly competent pet therapist. The countryside had been kind until 2 years ago. It was early May, just after the last frost, and the night began ordinary. I'd finished dinner, cleaned up, and planned to turn in early. I'd been binging an old detective show on my laptop. The kind where you know the murderer but watch anyway because the reveals are stubbornly satisfying. Just past 11:40, I got up for a snack. The kitchen smelled faintly of soap and coffee. The old fridge hummed. I stood barefoot on cold tile, reached into the cupboard for oat biscuits, and heard something. At first it was faint, a dragging like pebbles on gravel. I froze with a biscuit halfway to my mouth. The noise stopped. I thought maybe a fox or a deer nosing the yard, which happens with the forest edge so close. Runa, who usually snored on her blanket by the back door, sat up with blunt speed, ears forward. She didn't bark. She just watched. That made me listen harder. Runa barked at birds, at cows, at her reflection in the patio glass. When she was mute and alert, I felt a prickle. I pulled the curtain at the sink a fraction. Moonlight cut thin lines across the lawn. Otherwise, the world was a black sheet. Runa rose and planted herself at the back door, rigid, staring toward the tree line. Then I heard it clearer. A metallic rasp, not smooth but stuttering like chain on rough stone. Starting, stopping, starting again. It came from the right side of the house, not the woods. "Is someone out there?" I whispered, because saying it aloud felt like an invitation and also a question. Runa's whole body was still glued to the door. I locked it without looking, fingers trembling. My heart thudded like a bad drum. I switched off the kitchen light to avoid being a silhouette and eased toward the front of the house where my bedroom window faced the gravel drive. I pressed the curtain aside and peered through a sliver. Nothing moved. No headlights, no shadow. I told myself, loud enough to be mean, "You're being ridiculous. It's an animal." A stray dragging metal from the shed. I didn't want to believe it. Then the sound shifted. It didn't fade or drift away. Instead, it hopped, from the right side of the house to the front, and for a second the world held its breath with me. My skin crawled. I tasted copper on my tongue. Runa pressed against my calves, warm and steady, reminding me I wasn't entirely alone in that listening, patient dark. Not even completely. I heard it again, closer, as if someone were right outside the very window I was peeking through. Clink, scrape, pause, clink. I jerked the curtain down and stumbled back. Then the tapping began. At first it was polite, soft like a fingernail on glass. My breath hitched. I didn't want to look, but needed to. I raised the curtain a hair. Nothing, only dark and my own pale face. Still, the tapping persisted and grew bolder. Tap, 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 like pebbles landing on the pane. Runa's low growl rolled. Her hackles rose and she pressed against my leg, warm and rigid. She moved to the window and stared into the black, ears forward, tail stiff. I fumbled for my phone. No bars, of course. That was one of the costs of living out here. 10 minutes in a car for a single bar. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with Runa in the dark and listened until dawn. I remember my hands shaking when I locked the back door that night. The cold metal knob felt comforting. I pictured a shape at the window, a pale face watching. Runa whimpered once but stayed still. The silence afterward felt thick like a held breath. When I told Mrs. Callahan about the scrapes, she frowned. "That's not animal marks," she said quietly. "Animals don't make 3 neat parallel lines." Her words made the night heavier. I replayed the sounds over. The metallic rasp, the way it jumped around the house, the tapping. Sometimes I would catch myself checking the windows, stomach tight. In the morning, I walked the perimeter. Nothing seemed wrong except 3 long parallel scrapes under my bedroom window, each about 4 feet, as if something heavy had been dragged. I told myself it was animal or wind, but the knot in my stomach stayed. Over the next 2 weeks, the sounds returned 3 times. Always late, always the same. A metallic dragging along the right side. A sudden hop of the sound, then tapping. Once I swore I heard breathing, slow, human. Wind, I told myself. I mentioned it to Mrs. Callahan while walking. Runa trotted beside me. "There's a man renting the Doyle place," she said. "Moved in about a month ago. Quiet, I've seen him near your woods at night." My stomach dropped. "What does he look like?" I asked. "Tall, maybe 6'2". Black coat, hood up, head down. Doesn't speak." She said others had seen him too, standing by mailboxes at odd hours, then walking off without a word. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. A week later, the paper said police raided a nearby property after an anonymous tip and found a shed full of meth and other drugs. The tenant had gone by the time they arrived. No name, no arrest. I never saw him again. I try to explain that period to friends. They shrug. "Probably a fox with a collar," one said. "Maybe a junkie," another said. They weren't there. They didn't hear how the sound jumped from one end of the house to the other without footsteps. They didn't see Runa's eyes, the way she trembled in silence that meant something was close. To this day, I don't know what he wanted. A break-in, a scare, something worse? I still stare at the back door some nights, wondering what would have happened if I'd opened it that first time. I used to scoff at gut feelings, mostly. Sure, unfamiliar places made my shoulders tighten like anyone's would, but I relied on facts and routines. I was in my late 20s then. No kids, no mortgage, a job that kept me moving enough that each week felt like a new route. I worked for a small logistics firm out of Utah that set up satellite operations for corporate clients. It paid well enough sometimes, and I volunteered for odd runs others avoided, so I had steady work. 17 years ago, I took one of those runs, a shipment from our Salt Lake hub to the satellite office up near the Canadian border in northern Washington. The cases were bulky and not plane-friendly, and every regular driver was booked. Fine by me. I liked long drives, and the company sweetened the deal with a decent per diem and a return flight. I'd driven the route before, but never alone in a box truck, that in-between size that's awkward in tight turns but small enough to skip commercial licensing. I didn't think much of it. I'd driven bigger. I always preferred night driving. Fewer cars, steadier flow, a rhythm to the road. I planned to leave in the evening, around 6 or 7, push through until Southern Oregon, then sleep. I packed snacks, a thermos, and a beaten GPS. My portable CD player and a stack of scratched discs came because the rig's radio had the personality of static. The first stretch was ordinary. The sun dropped outside Boise and smeared the sky red and purple. I remember how ridiculous it felt to be soothed by taillights and empty road. I stopped for coffee and a quick stretch. The small rituals that make long driving tolerable. Bathroom break, refill, a cigarette out of habit though I'd quit, a song that fit the mood. I rolled on into the night, and at about 1 in the morning I pulled into a rest area just past the Oregon border. The lot smelled of floor cleaner and damp concrete. The building was low and functional, painted cinder block and bathed in that too bright fluorescent light that hides everything. A couple of big rigs slept at the far end, their cabs dimly lit like small rooms. Otherwise, the lot was empty. I parked near the restrooms because I liked doors and exits in view, and went inside. The men's room was cold, the mirror streaked with other people's faces. I washed my hands slow, watched the tired lines around my eyes, checked my reflection like you check a map, to see if the man in the glass still matched the man inside. I don't know why I lingered. Maybe it was boredom, maybe a stupid need to prove I was fine. When I stepped back outside, a car had pulled up beside my truck. I stopped for a second and scanned the lot. Dozens of empty spaces. One dark blue sedan, late 90s, parked nose to nose. No lights, engine quiet. I told myself I must have missed it when I pulled in, the rational part, and tried to keep my step even as the other part of me tightened. Probably someone sleeping, I said out loud to the air. No big deal. I kept my head down and walked past the car, feeling watched though I couldn't see anyone. That prickling at the back of my neck moved up toward my scalp. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, started the engine. For a bit the drive was nothing. Road radio, the old GPS muttering wrong turns. 10 miles, 20, the rhythm. Then the dash flickered, a quick annoyed blink, and the stereo coughed static. I tapped the panel and blamed a loose connection. A few miles later the lights dimmed briefly and snapped back. I laughed at myself, more sharp than funny. "Come on," I said, hitting the dash as if that would help. A little while after that, everything went out. Headlights, interior lights, even the gauges. For a raw, unreal stretch, I was driving at 60 on I-5 through trees with nothing around me but total black. No moon, no distant glow. The world became a hard, absolute absence. I still remember the stupid little mechanical click that sounded in the cabin when the power died, like a tiny animal escaping a trap. Panic didn't come at once. Anger did. I cursed, eased off the throttle, and coasted to the shoulder, hands tight on the wheel. When I killed the engine, the silence was enormous, the kind that presses into your ears. Then, as abruptly as it had failed, everything returned. Lights, radio, the soft hum of the dash. I sat there with the engine idling and my hands trembling, the tremor that lives somewhere between fury and fear. And I realized my breath had been holding for a long time. Then I kept driving. About 20 minutes later, I spotted another rest stop, smaller, older, set just off a bend in the highway and ringed by dense pines. I hadn't planned to stop again, but my bladder disagreed. I pulled in and immediately noticed how empty the lot was. No rigs, no sedans, just a few cracked spaces and a squat restroom building with a single weak light above the door. I told myself it would be quick. Inside the men's room, the air smelled of disinfectant and cold metal. I washed my hands slower than I needed to, watched my face in the streaked mirror, and felt that strange, thin awareness you get when you've been alone on the road too long. I stepped back outside, and there he was, standing by the passenger side of my truck as if he'd been there the whole time. He looked about mid-60s, heavy-set, in a bulky jacket and worn jeans. His face had the practical lines of someone used to weather and work. No other cars in the lot, no headlights coming. He smiled politely and nodded. "Cold night," he said. His voice was rough, gravelly, with the kind of rasp that comes from years outside. Little snow in the air. I glanced up. Tiny flakes were drifting. They weren't sticking yet. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "Didn't think it would start this early." He took a step closer and looked along the side of the truck, eyes moving as if scanning for something. "You having some mechanical issues?" he asked. The question felt invasive. I hadn't told anyone about the dash flicker, the sudden blackout, nothing. The fact that he asked made the hairs along my neck prick. My first sensible reaction was annoyance. My second was a small cold alarm. "No," I replied, forcing a laugh that sounded too thin in the quiet. "Just needed to stretch my legs." He smiled wider, that kind of smile that tries to be disarming. "Well," he said, "if you run into trouble, I live a few miles up the road. You're welcome to come by. Coffee's on the stove. Couch if you need a nap. Who offers a stranger a couch at 2 in the morning?" I felt the urge to be polite. Manners are a reflex. "Thanks, but I'd better keep moving," I said, more curt than I'd intended, and climbed into the cab. As I pulled away, I watched in the side mirror. He walked behind the restrooms and vanished into shadow. No car, no friend waiting, just him blending into the trees. A few miles down, I stopped at a gas station near Grants Pass. Oregon still had attendance. While the man filled the tank, I ducked inside to buy a drink and clear my head. Back outside, I did a slow circle around the truck the way you do when something nags at you. Near the front fender, a dark, greasy smear caught my eye. Smudged like a palm print, slick to the touch and carrying a faint animal tang I couldn't place. I touched it with a gloved finger and felt a small prick of unease. Across the lot, parked at the edge, a dark blue sedan sat with a figure hunched in the driver's seat. The sight tightened something in my chest. The car, was it the same one from the earlier rest area? Maybe coincidence. Maybe not. I stared until the cold felt like it pressed inside my skull and then started the truck. Snow began to pick up after Eugene. The highway turned slick and flat, a long gray ribbon. I eased down, more out of respect for the road than anything else, and noticed a pair of headlights behind me. At first I told myself it was random, but every lane change, every change of speed, the headlights matched me, never passing, never falling back, like a shadow that followed my motion with intent. I took the next exit and found a gas station with a patrol car out front. Relief was oddly physical. I wanted someone official to share the weirdness with. The officer, a woman in her 30s bundled in a heavy coat, looked at the road and said the storm would worsen and suggested I take a room at a nearby motel. I almost unburdened everything, the man, the sedan, the electrical failure, but the words sounded ridiculous in my head. "Officer, I think an old guy's following me and sabotaging my truck." I shut my mouth. Instead, I thanked her and drove to the motel. I parked the truck behind the building where it wouldn't be obvious from the road, checked in quickly, double-locked the door and dropped on the bed. I expected sleep to take me. It didn't. Every creak of the walls and crunch of snow outside made my pulse pick up. I pictured the man's face, his smile, the way he'd asked, "You having some mechanical issues?" Over and over like a scratched phrase. At 7 a.m. I gave up on sleep, ate a hurried breakfast, checked out and finished the rest of the drive. The snow had built up by then, but nothing else happened. The rest of the trip was ordinary in the blunt way the world can be when a storm becomes the story. Still, that night hasn't left me. I ran the possibilities like a list. Was he a drifter, lonely and oddly generous? A man with a real couch and a warm kettle? Or something darker, waiting for someone tired and alone? Was the blue sedan coincidence or part of it? How did he know about the truck's sudden failure? I never found answers. What I did take was a small, stubborn change in me. Since then, I've noticed the tiny alarms my body throws up, an off glance that sticks, an offer that feels misplaced, and I listen. Small refusals and small cautions can add up to safety. Declining coffee at 2 a.m., choosing a motel with lights, parking out of sight. That night I made enough small choices to put myself on the safe side of a line I can't explain. I almost became someone else on a road that night, and something about that possibility has followed me ever since. I used to think I was hard to shake. I'm 36, grew up in the rough parts of Birmingham, and spent my 20s working security at warehouses and in rough pubs. You learn to read the worst of people, drunk, drugged, angry, desperate, until you become a little cold, a little numb. Ordinary sounds stop making you jump, your face stops showing alarm. But last winter something happened that I can't fully explain no matter how I try to talk myself out of it. It wasn't gory, and nobody was physically hurt, but it changed the way I measure instinct and danger. We live in a quiet coastal town in southern England called Greybridge, the kind of place where most people either retire or raise young families. Kayla and I share a ground floor flat in a modest 3-story building. We've been together 5 years. I work remote tech support, headphones on, problem solving by the light of my laptop. Kayla is a part-time nurse who does odd night shifts at the nearby private hospital. That Saturday night in late January, she was meeting 2 uni friends, Hannah and Priya, who she hadn't seen for months. "I'll be back late," she told me, kissing my cheek. "Don't fall asleep on the sofa." I said I'd stay up in case they needed a lift. I wasn't doing much anyway, some online poker, a few YouTube videos. The weather was dreadful, relentless drizzle, and a wind that seemed to find every gap in the windows. Around 10:30 p.m., I paused a video about famous poker scams when I heard the unmistakable clack, clack, clack of the front door handle jiggling. For a second, I thought it might be Kayla. Maybe she'd forgotten something and come back. But there'd been no call or text. I waited. The sound came again, quick and deliberate, a rattle that wasn't the fumbling of someone lost. Our flat opens straight onto the communal corridor. There's a peephole at eye level I hardly ever use. The silence after that second rattle made my skin tighten. I muted the laptop and moved as quietly as I could, easing to the door with the kind of careful steps you take when you don't want to announce yourself. The handle had stopped. I pressed my eye to the peephole and saw a man, not at the door, but 5 or 6 feet down the hall, standing with his back turned. He was tall, about 6 foot, wearing a black hoodie and dark jeans. The way he stood was wrong, both hands cupped either side of his head, fingers laced over his scalp like someone trying to keep their thoughts from spilling out. The sight chilled me in a way a bar fight never had. He wasn't knocking, not calling out, not doing any of the obvious things people do when they want attention. I whispered, "What the hell?" before I knew I was speaking. After a few seconds, I stepped back and switched off the hallway light so no glow would seep under the door frame. Part of me thought about ringing the police. What would I even say? That someone fiddled with the handle and then stood in the corridor looking miserable? People mix up flats all the time. Still, a cold, old unease crept up my spine, the same feeling that used to warn me when trouble smelled close. I waited in the dark with my phone in my hand for maybe 15 minutes. No footsteps, no fresh sounds. Eventually, I convinced myself he'd gone. Maybe he'd realized his mate lived upstairs or in a different building. I reopened my laptop, fingers tapping while my mind kept slipping back to the door. The awareness stuck at the edges of my hearing. That small tightening you feel when something is almost right and almost wrong at the same time. Then around 11:10, the handle rattled again, this time harder and longer. My heart kicked and I moved without thinking. I strode to the door, flicked the latch and yanked it open. He was standing right there this time, not 5 feet away. He didn't look up at first. Rain had beaded on his sleeve and his shoulders trembled. He lifted his head slowly, eyes hollow, and I remember the sound he made like a tired apology. He blinked like I'd startled him. His eyes were bloodshot with dark rings beneath them. His face was pale and gaunt, maybe early 40s. He didn't push forward or shout. He didn't move much at all. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to sound in control. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it. A breath of words washed out and died. "You've been trying my door," I said louder. "If you're lost or confused, say so. Otherwise, I'll call the police." He looked like he might answer. His lips formed something that was half a mumble. "I thought," he managed, voice thin. I narrowed my eyes. "You thought what?" He shook his head and stepped back as if every pace cost him. "Sorry," he muttered. "Didn't mean to. I just thought I remembered something." He turned and sat on the floor at the edge of the hallway by the stairs, head in his hands as if the movement was easier than explaining. I closed the door and stayed with my hand on the handle, suddenly uncertain. The block was quiet except for rain on the windows and distant pipes. I locked it, checked the bolt twice, then went back to the sofa with my phone. I texted Kayla, "Weird guy trying the front door. Don't come back in a taxi. I'll pick you and the girls up. Just text me when you're ready." She replied 2 minutes later. "Bar finish, are you okay? I'll call you." "Should be another hour or so." I told her not to hurry home. Better tired than worried. She sounded more awake than she looked. When she arrived, she squeezed my hand and said, "Weird people everywhere, trying to make light of it." No more noise came from the corridor. That silence was worse than any clatter. It felt expectant, like the hush before something breaks. By midnight, I was still on edge, every creak making me sit up. Kayla phoned at 12:15 and I was already grabbing my keys. She was under the bars, awning when I pulled up, coat over her arm, kebab in hand. Her friends waved. "What happened?" she asked as she climbed in. I told her on the drive. "Probably drunk," she said, practical, or high, or thought he lived here. "Maybe," I said, though he hadn't smelled of alcohol. He didn't look like someone out of it. He looked emptied, bone-tired. Back at the flat, the entryway was empty. I checked both sides of the corridor. Nothing. We locked up and tried to sleep, but every wind gust woke me. The next morning, I knocked on a couple of neighbors' doors casually. No one had visitors. No one had seen anything. By the weekend, I'd almost convinced myself. A lost person. Someone in trouble, not necessarily dangerous. Then it happened again. Not to me, but to flat 3, 2 floors up. Sarah, who lives there with her daughter, told me a week later someone had rattled her handle around 2A. And then sat in the stairwell. When she peeked out, she saw a tall man in a black hoodie sitting perfectly still. She didn't open the door. She called the police. Officers arrived 20 minutes later, and he had gone. He'd been there quietly for at least 15 minutes. The police told Sarah what they told me, likely a drunk, nothing to worry about. They found no one. It's been 6 months. He never came back. Still, sometimes when I walk home late, I catch the shape of a figure near the bins or under the stairwell across the road, not moving, just watching. Every night I double lock the front door and sit in the lounge an extra hour, listening, waiting. Because I can't shake the feeling that one night he might remember what he thought he'd forgotten and come back. I tell myself it's nonsense. But that shrug never reaches my stomach, and the worry wakes me more nights than not.